Hey everyone, it's that guy in Hutch, Jason Probst, and you're listening to That Podcast in Hutch. And I have with me today Christopher Acker, who is my producer, and I brought him in because he sat through this interview with me, and I thought it would be good for us in this intro to talk a little bit with each other about our thoughts on this. We had Brandy Harris in, who her son Sebastian died of a fentanyl overdose, and I won't get into too many details of the story because I want you to listen to her tell the story of this. But she's very open and honest about the experience of losing a child to fentanyl, and she's been a big help to me. But Chris, what did you kind of take away from that conversation?
Yeah, thank you for having me in the studio for this recording. Brandy's become a recent friend of mine, and to hear her share her story, it's almost difficult to describe how impactful it is to hear whenever anyone shares that much about themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it was a really powerful story of family and loss, and that's something that's personal to me. As you know, I've experienced loss in my family as well, and to hear it from the other side of a parent
Mm-hmm.
was there were times during the recording where I was tearing up.
Yeah.
Which maybe is unprofessional of me as the producer. Maybe I should try and hold it together better.
I think it would be you'd not quite be human if you couldn't. Hold it. If you could make it through that whole interview without feeling something,
Yeah.
I felt a lot through that because a lot of it's hard to hear.
Mm-hmm. But I think it's important, and it's powerful, and I think that it is challenging to hear.
Yeah.
And I think it's a challenge that I think is worth taking on to not only understand Brandy better, but just understand what others that have gone through her situation have experienced, to understand any time that you can have that empathy for another person,
Mm-hmm.
and understand as well as you can understand what they've gone through. We will never understand it completely.
No.
Even with this with Brandy sharing as much as she shared, we will never understand exactly what she's gone through completely,
Mm-hmm.
but we've come one step closer because of this story.
Yeah, that's right. We can get a sense of that feeling, but we'll never actually feel it.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I thought was really that really kind of stood out to me in this. I mean, there's a lot that stood out, but the feeling that I had as we were interviewing her, that she recognized how she didn't know what questions to ask when these things were happening with her son.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't know how to approach it or what questions to ask. And also the thing that I don't think we talk about enough is that she was, she talked about working 70 hours a week, and she's trying to keep everyone's head above water. And
Mm-hmm.
at some level, she's just moving the train down the road and doing everything she can there, while all these other things are happening in her family's life. And it was hard to hear that sometimes the reality of life doesn't really give us enough time to really see the world around us,
Mm-hmm.
and even things that we have to see to protect people that we love. And that she talked about that, and I think one of the things that she's kind of had to grapple with over the years since her son's death.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's a really important aspect, is that she was doing everything that I think that she could have done. And, she briefly mentioned some feelings of like, maybe she should have done more, maybe she should have asked different questions,
Mm-hmm.
but she was doing absolutely everything
Yeah.
that she could have been doing.
Yeah, I got that. Yeah, I think that's how I felt too, that she was just doing what any parent would be doing, trying to keep things moving and try to keep things afloat.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very, very unfortunate. But I hope everyone will listen to this episode all the way through to the end, because I think it's the progression that we go through to talk about her experience and what happened. But just for a little background, so you know, Brandy's son Sebastian died about 2.5 years ago on April 15th, 22. from a fentanyl overdose. And in the time since then, she's been very instrumental in helping move the needle on legislation that has improved, well, first off, legalizing fentanyl testing strips, and then getting the Good Samaritan law into effect. And she's been a really big advocate for that, and she's come to Topeka to testify anytime we've needed her to come up and speak on this. And but I wanted to get her in the studio to share a little bit more, because I know this experience about her, and I've talked to her several times about, the way her life's been since Sebastian's death. But I've always wanted to get her on to talk about her experience with our listeners and with the community, so they can understand that experience too, and learn more about somebody in the community who's had who's been directly affected by the fentanyl crisis.
Mm. Yeah, Brandy's an excellent member of our community, and I'm glad that now people have a chance to understand a little more of her story.
Absolutely. So with that, I hope you enjoy listening to Brandy Harris. You want to say your name into the mic so we know we've got the sound levels set right?
My name is Brandy Harris.
I was thinking this morning about how to get in this story, and I think I want to start at the very beginning.
Okay.
Can you tell me about Sebastian when he was a baby?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So Sebastian was my firstborn, and it's that type of kid that makes you think that all kids are great, and mothers that have bad kids must be bad mothers, because he was amazing. You tell him not to do something and he wouldn't do it ever again. So when he was a little kid, he was just always like doing exactly what he was supposed to be doing. If I told him to pick something up, he picked it up. He was just excellent. And it was ridiculous how excellent he was. And then I had my second child, and yeah.
Which we hear that often about
Yeah.
second children, right? They're quite different than
Yes.
the first children. What's his birthday?
July 14th, 2000.
Okay. And so was he born in Hutch?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to think. Blonde hair?
Oh, super big, curly, blonde hair.
Big curly.
Yeah, just like my hair, only rather blonde, yeah.
Yeah. And as he got older, like, what kind of things did he really take an interest to?
Well, he was really intelligent, so he would dive deep into lots of different things and just learn everything that he could about that particular thing. And he would then move on to something else. He was never super into anything until his sister came along, and then he was super into her.
Oh, this Nen.
Yeah.
Right. Can you talk a little bit about Nen?
Yeah. Nin was born in 2006, and she has Apert syndrome, and it's a chromosomal abnormality. And so she had numerous health problems, and that she was the light of Sebastian's life. For
yes.
sure.
When you say that he was really into her, can you talk about that?
Yeah,
So he would have been 6 when she was born.
Yeah, and it's just he thought that rainbows came out of her diaper. She could do absolutely no harm, and she just was perfect in his eyes. And she was tube fed, so she had a feeding tube. And he would be diligent about, when he would pick her up and he'd hold her, he'd make sure that her feeding tube wasn't kinked and everything like that. And I have hundreds of pictures of him and her just asleep on the couch, where he is just holding her while she's eating her bolus through her feeding tube, because, it's on a little IV tube.
Yeah.
And the tube's hanging down and everything like that. And it's just always had her. And then when she got older, well, she didn't walk until she was 4. And so, but after she started walking, he started doing all sorts of stuff with her, walking with her to the quick shop to get her a bug juice and stuff like that. But she was having a lot of trouble when she was younger she was super skinny, and she had like no trunk space. So like she was in physical therapy all the time, and they wanted us to help, do some of this stuff at home with her. So he had this thing where he would put her on his lap, and her legs would be like wrapped around his waist, and she'd be facing upwards. And he'd scoot her back to where her back was kind of arched down, and he would just tickle her until she would move up. And it was a game, but it was like sort of like a setup for her. But it was a game to try to improve her trunk strength. And so he would just do little things like that to try to help her out and make it fun.
So he was always trying to help her get stronger, get better.
Oh, sure.
Feel cared for.
Yeah. And make her feel special. Always told her how beautiful she was and everything like that, because, he knew that she was going to hear throughout her life that she looked different. And he just always tried to make sure that she didn't feel different. So that was, I think, one of his main goals in life, was to make sure she had as normal of a life as possible.
And that carried on all through like middle school, high school,
sure,
adult life.
When she got into school and started to do homework, I'm not the best at being super patient. And so he just took over the duty of like helping her with her homework. So when she would have homework to do, he would be sitting at the table with her, explaining to her why 10 minus 6 equals 4. And, he'd be showing her how to do it and talking her through it and everything like that, just super patient with her, just little things like that.
Yeah.
So her whole life.
And at this time, it's you I mean, you're a single mother, right? So it's you and Sebastian.
Talon,
and Nen, right? 3 children altogether. And so I know a little bit of the story about how Sebastian became addicted to painkillers. Can you talk about that?
Sure. And this is the things that I could gather. A lot of it is after the fact, because Sebastian did keep a lot of things from me. And I realize now that I probably didn't ask the right questions, because Sebastian was not a liar, and he wouldn't have lied to me. If I would have asked him, he would have told me. And that got him into some trouble sometimes.
Yeah.
But I didn't ask all the right questions, and he didn't tell me because he was so afraid of putting more stress on me because of all the stress that I was going through with his sister's medical stuff.
Yeah.
And so he was always afraid to bother me anymore.
So you feel like he kept a lot of things to himself just to make sure that you didn't have to worry about it?
Yeah, I do think so.
Yeah.
That's for sure. But so I think that it was kind of a series of events. He was involved. He was riding his bike, and he got hit by a truck. And we thought everything was okay, but then the next day he had quite a bit of pain in his flank. And so we took him to same-day care, and they gave him painkillers. And I think at that point, from what I've gathered, he had tried pot at that point, but that was the only thing that he had tried. And so he got the painkillers, and he really liked those. And when those were gone, he decided that he was going to start smoking pot. But before that, he had just tried it I think just once before that, from what I understand. And so then he got in trouble at school for having a container that had residue of pot in it, and he got put on probation. And since he was on probation, he had to not be able to smoke any pot. And he did tell me this, like he actually told me this. This isn't just me gathering it, but that he would find pain pills, because when you're on papers, they test you, but you usually know when your appointment is. And so if he used pain pills, he could not use them for a certain amount of time, and he would be clean. But if you smoke marijuana, it's in your system for 30 days or however long that's in there. And so it became a better option for him to use that because he could clean it out of his system a lot easier. And so that's where it started.
And how old was he when the accident with the truck happened?
Oh, man. It just came up on my memories on Facebook the other day. I would say, I think that he was going into his freshman year of high school.
Okay.
Because the accident happened the day that football practice was starting.
Okay.
And it was kind of just a rolling effect because he got injured in the wreck, so the doctor wouldn't let him start football.
Mm-hmm.
And Hutch football is kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And
It's a big thing.
Since he wasn't released by the doctor, he didn't get the first 2 weeks of football practice, so he didn't play.
Yeah.
And so when he didn't get any play time, he quit the football team. And then his friends started to change because his friends that he had had before
Yep.
were doing the things that he used to do. And so that was just kind of how it snowballed, I believe, is that, one incident led to another, and there's not one thing that I could pinpoint that I could go back and change. I mean, maybe the accident, but, it's just kind of snowballed. And
Yeah, a lot of things, a lot of circumstances came through on that. Did you come to understand what he liked about painkillers? Did he ever talk about that?
I did talk to him about it in the last few years, and Sebastian was absurdly intelligent, so much that he couldn't shut his mind off ever, and it kind of normalized him. It made him not think so much.
Yeah.
And I think that that's what it was, is that he wanted to shut his mind off sometimes.
Yeah. And that was a way that the painkillers or the substance use was a way to do that.
Sure.
Yeah. And did that progress during high school, or was it kind of a roller coaster of?
It was really up and down.
Yeah.
I mean, there was really great times, and then there was some really low times, and I mean, it was, it was definitely a roller coaster. It didn't go straight up, that's for sure. It was up and down, and the whole time, I think that he never lost who he was. And so I think that if it would have just taken off from there and just gone completely downhill from there, then maybe he would have lost himself. But he always, he would get a little too far gone, and then he'd come back, and, he would be Sebastian again, and he would be the best big brother in the world and everything like that. Not that he wasn't a good big brother when he was using, because he still was.
Yeah.
He just tended to not be around quite as much, finding reasons to not be around.
What were some of the differences that you could see when he was using and when he wasn't? You talk about
Sure.
his, presence and his interaction with his family.
This is all hindsight, because I didn't know at the time. And like I said, I wasn't asking the right questions. And, I mean, definitely he would be more distant, but he would sleep more often. He would sneak out of the house, he would just cry a lot. Mm-hmm. And Sebastian was a very emotional kid, and he cried a lot anyways, but I don't want to make it sound like he was a big crybaby, but he was emotional, and he felt things very deeply. Yeah. But his crying would definitely increase. And so to the point where sometimes I just thought, he's just going through something right now. And a lot of times it would coincide with, his long-term girlfriend and him breaking up or something like that. Yeah. So I would just kind of assume that it had something to do with those emotions that go along with ending a long-term relationship. Yeah. And because that's all he really ever had was long-term girlfriends. Yeah. So
I kind of want to dive into something a little bit too. I want to go back to the fact that you're a single mother at this point, right? Mm-hmm. So you're, you say a couple times I wasn't asking the right questions, but you were probably, I'm imagining, you've got 3 kids that you're raising and providing for. You are working, probably. Can you talk about that? I mean, I think sometimes people don't understand fully the different ways that a single parent's attention is divided, and all the things that they're surviving to try to just make sure that things are staying on track for their kids. So I guess I'm saying when you say I'm not asking the right questions, in my mind, I'm saying how would you know what questions to ask, and how would you even have capacity to know to ask the questions?
Right.
Because you're just trying to keep things on track.
Right. And that is something that I think goes back to the fact that I've had pain pills before and not a fan.
Yeah.
So in my head, why would somebody want this? It makes me feel nauseous. And like, I know that people get addicted to them, but like it has no effect on me like that. And so in my head, I'm thinking Sebastian's just like me. He's got my genes, my blood. No, and so I just think that I told myself things like there's no way this would happen because this isn't something that I would do. I mean, and I had pot a couple times when I was young, and I don't like that either.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I don't have an addictive personality, so, I didn't pass it on to my kids, which is ridiculous because I have other family members, and there's other factors that influence it. And but that is the case, is that I didn't know the right questions to ask. I wasn't well versed on it. And should I have been? Well, looking back, if it would have saved Sebastian, man, I wish I would have read all up on it, and I wish I would have known what was happening. I wish that I would have asked other questions, and I wish that I would have been able to effectively save my son, But it is true. Like, when you don't know, you don't know. And sometimes looking back, I feel like maybe I did stick my head in the sand, because obviously the signs were there, and I didn't want to see them, or I didn't have the mental capacity to be able to see them because of everything else I was going through, which is what you brought up. The, working, I worked about 70 hours a week most of the time. I had a health challenged daughter. I have a middle son who got lost in the shuffle because there was so much else going on. And me being a middle child myself, I always felt horrible about that. I always felt like I was leaving him out, but he didn't demand anything from me. Yeah. And that in itself is a completely different story that, I think looking back when you raise your kids, you always have things that you regret. Yeah. I don't think there's any way to not have that. But, I had a health challenged daughter. I had an older son who was amazing 90% of the time, and then made some really stupid decisions the other 10% of the time. And then I had a middle child that didn't get enough attention. And I was spread a little thin. Yeah. And, but that's not, honestly, that's not an excuse. There's millions of single mothers who do it. And so.
But I think I would guess that their experience is very much like yours. It's just the working and trying to maintain, and the caregiving. You're the one doing the caregiving, actually, down to the making sure the house is clean and making sure that the food is there and the grocery shopping and all these things. That's a lot for one person to manage, trying to manage 4 people's lives, including your own, and make sure all these balls stay in the air. So is that something, and we talk about that, it feels like that's something you've thought about a lot. Is that a thought that hangs in your mind a lot?
Absolutely. Yeah. Definitely. I try to give myself grace. I do. It's not the easiest thing to do, though. So.
Yeah, I can imagine. So Sebastian, then we're kind of in high school. Things changed. He was playing sports before that. Then he wasn't. His friends changed. What became his interest in high school?
Oh, just like hanging out with friends. It was weird because he would play video games with his friends, but he never played them at home, even though he had the stuff to play video games at home. And, skateboarding, just hanging out with friends, doing what
Kids do.
What kids do. And so, but I mean, he was never really into cars or anything like that. But my nephew and him would play video games together. Him and Jeremy were really tight back then. And, well, his whole life, they were like brothers too. So, he liked watching inappropriate shows with Nin that he knew that I would get mad that he was letting her watch, but he was the cool big brother that let her watch Family Guy and all that other crap that I did not want her watching, but
he would do it.
He would do it.
Which is pretty classic Big Brother.
Yes, it is. But yeah, so I mean, that's the kind of stuff that he would do.
Sounds like he had a good sense of humor too.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah, so he liked to get at you a little bit.
Yeah. And I knew he did it, and I'd act like I was mad when Nin would snitch.
Yeah.
She'd be like, "Bubba let me watch Family Guy, Mom," and I'm like, "No, he didn't. I gave him a warning, just to
play into the shtick, right?
Yeah.
To make sure that they felt like they had that. So I know that it's some. So he graduates high school.
Sure.
Right. You got through
Early,
there
yes.
early, and you must have felt good about that. I mean, you had some of these concerns, throughout high school, but there is always a sigh of relief when you get your kid through high school and you're like, okay, they made it.
Yeah.
Now we can move on to what's next. But some of the issues carried into adulthood.
Yeah. Let's see here. So not much. I think he got in trouble once after he turned 18, but some of the stuff that he was going through legally was from before he was 18. And he had been, for the most part, clean for about 3 years.
Okay.
And so it was mostly all when he was a minor.
Okay. So in early adulthood, he from probably 17 to 20?
No, it was more like late 18 to 20. Well, he was almost 22 when he died.
Okay.
So, I think that for the most part, he was clean. I think that he had slipped up once in there or something like that, just from what I had heard.
Yeah.
But for the most part, him and Catherine got together, and she is a ray of freaking sunshine.
This is his girlfriend.
Yeah. Sebastian loved her with such intensity that it made my heart hurt because I was so freaking proud of how well he loved her. He loved her with every fiber of her being. And she told me once that when they first started dating, that she knew there was a hierarchy. And Nin was up top. I was below that, and she could be underneath that, but she would never be up above me or Nin. And that wasn't the truth. But she
felt that.
Yeah. She knew how much he loved me and how much he loved his sister. Yeah. And so, but it wasn't until later on, and when Sebastian was like 18, 19, and 20, that him and Talon really got close. Like when Talon came out of the closet and told everybody that he was gay, he told Sebastian first. Yeah. And I think that really changed their relationship because Sebastian was just like, oh, crap. I probably made fun of you for being gay when you were younger, and I didn't know you really were. But, I've got you, Bubs. I 100%. And from that moment on, he had apologized for how he had treated him maybe in the past. And from that moment on, he was fully 100% supportive, and you didn't say nothing bad about his brother. Yeah. So that's when their relationship really started to blossom, was when Sebastian was a young adult. And so they became really close then.
How old was Talon?
They're all 3 years apart.
3 years,
so,
okay.
Yeah, so Talon would have been like 15.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So, and so then they got tighter. Yeah. And stayed that way?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they did.
And then, so Sebastian is early adulthood now. He's out of high school. and he's doing pretty well. He's with Catherine, and he's at this point he's forward looking, right?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, he, let's see here. He had gotten, I think that he had to serve some jail time for something that had happened in the past. And when he got out, he started working at the Quick Shop. And on 17th and Monroe, and it got robbed. And me and Catherine asked him to please not work that job anymore. And let's see here. Then he went and worked at AJ's for a while. And he was working at AJ's for a while. And then he landed a job at Yoder Meats in Yoder. And he really, really liked it there. And they liked him a lot, too. So that was a very good job for him. The pay wasn't very high, but it was enough for him to be able to pay his restitution and his stuff like that. And I really think that that's something that's not necessarily talked about a whole lot, is when you decide to change your life, like, you have to fix a bunch of crap that you had demolished in the process. I know that, like, for people that have children, you have to fix the relationship with your children, but you also have to pay off all these bills. And not only the bills that you let go because you were using, but also the bills that you acquired while you were getting into trouble. And all these court fees and everything like that. And it's like thousands of dollars to get your life straight. And I think that that's a lot of the reason why some people don't. It's because they feel helpless.
Yeah.
And it just, like, so much all at once. You get out and you have no money, and you're just like, you have to find a place to live. And I know that Sebastian did stay at the Oxford house for a little bit. And then he moved in with some friends and his girlfriend. But yeah, so, I mean, the Oxford house definitely did help him, but there was still, like, a ton of bills that he was working on paying. And so it just, I think that part of it just, he felt like he could never get ahead.
I think in a broader sense, I think this is one of the big issues that people trying to recover and repair their lives struggle with, is that they're doing such heavy work in their own personal lives and with their relationships that they've damaged and with the people that they care about. And then on top of that, we have this big, punitive criminal system that says, because you were an addict and because you made some poor choices, we now have created this huge monetary burden. Not just monetary burden, we also make you come to court regularly.
And which caused him to not be able to work, which caused him to not be able to pay as much. And yes, it's kind of a vicious cycle.
It's a very interconnected system that creates a lot of problems there.
Yeah.
So it's at some point he starts using again, though. Tell the story, because my description was not entirely accurate. He's not using on a regular basis, right?
No, so my grandma was getting pretty sick. This is early 22, really early 22. And so he's spending a lot of time with grandma, and she was an inmate at the nursing home and stuff like that. And then grandma passes away. And I'm not 100% sure if that's what did it, but him and my grandmother were very close. So I'm not sure if that's what made him decide to reach out to somebody. And so he reached out to that guy and got something. And this was we had his phone records. It was like the very, very end of March or the beginning of April.
In 22?
22.
Okay.
And he used, but Catherine got him, and I think she Narcaned him, which they didn't tell me about.
Okay.
So she Narcaned him. And, they didn't tell me about that, but I had started seeing, like, I would invite him over for dinner, and he loved my cooking. But I'd invite him over for dinner, and he'd be like, yeah, not tonight, Mom, I'm tired, and, stuff like that. And so that was, unusual for him to go so long without seeing me, so I was feeling a little weird. I was feeling a little, things have been going so good for so long, is the other shoe going to drop?
Yeah.
And so then so he had used that one time, and his girlfriend, Catherine, and his two friends, Cody and Nia, had kind of an intervention with him, and they're like, please don't do this to us. Like, you have come so far, you don't need to do this. And I didn't find out about this until afterwards.
Yeah.
And so then I went to work on Friday, April 15th, 2022. And my client had just sat down in front of me, and I was at work on Fridays. I worked in Wichita.
Okay.
And
you're work in the beauty industry.
Right, yeah. And so I was getting ready to do a set of eyelashes on my client, and she had just laid down in front of me, and my phone rings, and it's Catherine. And not that it's unheard of that she would call me, but she was at work, and she's more of a texter if she has something to say, you know. And she was a mail lady. She delivered mail, and so that doesn't leave you a lot of time to message, because she was one that she was in McPherson and stuff like that. But so she called me, and she said, well, I tell my client, I said, Catherine doesn't call me very often. I'm going to take this. And so I stepped out of the room, and the service wasn't very good there, so I went outside. And she said, I actually hope that I regret calling you and telling you this, and I hope Sebastian gets mad at me for it, but I have reason to believe that Sebastian used this morning. He had taken the morning off because the maintenance guy was coming over, and he needed to let him in. And she was just like, but the maintenance guy just called me and said he's been knocking on the door for 10 minutes, and the video cameras show that Sebastian's car's still there. And and I was just like, okay. And she goes, but I have reason to believe that he used. And I was just like, okay. All right, we won't talk about why right now. That's not important. Okay, I'm headed home. And she goes, no, you don't need to head home. Like, she's like, I just wait until I call you back. And so I went back inside, and I told my client, I was just like, I'm sorry, I gotta go. And I took off and left. And while I was driving, I called Talon, and I said, go to your brother's house and check on him right now. And he's like, why? And I was just like, please, Kat thinks he used, go check on him right now. And he said, okay. And Kat had also called her friend, Nia. And Nia got there first and called an ambulance. And Talon got there and saw his brother on the floor. And they worked on him for quite some time. And I was driving when they called it, and Talon called me to tell me. And I just remember everything stopping, but I'm driving. I'm on the highway. And I just punching the top of my car going, no. And I was just like, I was just hitting the top of my car over and over again. And Talon's like, pull over. And my legs are shaking. And I'm like, I am not pulling over, but my leg's shaking and I'm trying to drive. So I set my cruise control so it's not. And I'm going as fast as I feel comfortable going. And, you know, I drive back to Hutch. And everybody was there when I got there. And I had to call my mom I had to call my dad. I called my dad and I said, Dad, come home. Because my dad lives in Harrington. Lived in Harrington. And I said, come home. I need you. And he said, what's going on? And I was just like, Sebastian's gone, Dad. And I was like, come home right now. I need you. And he said, well, I'm at the doctor's office and they just told me they want to do heart surgery on me. Like, immediately. And he was just like, let me see what I can do. And he told the doctor, sorry, it's going to have to wait. My daughter needs me. And I don't think that they meant that day, but they wanted to schedule it that day. And so, so then my dad drove back into town. I think he was in Salina I think he was at the doctor in Salina when that happened. My mom was in like Wisconsin, or I don't remember for sure where she was, but it was a long ways away.
Yeah.
But luckily my nephew was actually with her. They were working together at the time. So my mom didn't have to drive all the way back by herself. But yeah, so that was, and Talon tells me that sometimes he still has nightmares of my screaming. And I felt awful because he shouldn't have had to do that. I honestly feel really bad for calling him and asking him to go check on his brother. And, but obviously there's nothing that I can do about it now, but I really wish he didn't have to hear that because I can't imagine how it would feel to have your mom scream like that.
Yeah. Did you find out any details about what had happened?
Yeah. They knew that day, pretty much. They were just like, we think it was fentanyl. So, Sebastian, I think that people that like pain pills tend to go to heroin. And I was so naive that day I had to ask them what heroin was. So that's one thing that made me think that, like, I really was not asking the right questions. I didn't even know what my son's drug of choice was.
Yeah.
And, I mean, it makes sense because he liked pain pills.
Yeah.
But it makes sense to me now, but I didn't know what heroin was. I did not know that. And so I had heard it a million times, but I didn't know what was in it or anything of that sort. I had no idea that he had ever done it before, And I knew that he had done some stuff, and I knew that some of them weren't good. Yeah. And I knew that some of them were really bad. And but the drugs that I was really worried about were like meth, because it's so dirty and you don't know what's in it and it's how it's made and stuff like that. But
in Hutch, we don't. When we talk about drugs in Hutchinson, it's normally meth.
Yeah.
Right. That's what I think most of us know about. Heroin's not been the drug that most people know much about.
Yeah. So when the police officers came out, they asked, they're like, what was his drug of choice? And I'm like, they're like, what do you think he took? And I'm like, and then his friends were like, heroin. His drug of choice was heroin. That's what he would have been getting. And I was just like, what's heroin? Like, what's in it? I don't even know. And so they knew. And he's just like, well, the color consistency does not look like heroin. It looks like fentanyl. And I think they said the color changes when there's fentanyl in it. Well, there wasn't any heroin in it at all. I think it was all fentanyl.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So.
That had been passed off as heroin.
I'm guessing so. Yeah.
Yeah. Kit, what was your life in the days, that was April 15th, right? Mm-hmm. What was your life like in the days and weeks after that? I
mean, it was just, you're completely numb, and there's these people throwing stuff at you, and I had to have my best friend Susie, like, take care of my phone, because I just couldn't. And I was just like, reply. I was like, if you feel comfortable acting like me, act like me. Say thank you, be polite. I was like, if you don't, just say, hey, Brandy is not okay. Like, you're going to have to give her some time or something like that. And I mean, I seriously had a secretary for a while. She had to protect me from all these people throwing stuff at me, which isn't their fault. They know that what I had just been through was horrific. I just couldn't mentally handle it. And I pretty much shut down. Yeah. And, there was many days where it was just me telling Nin and my nephew Jeremy just laying on my bed together. Yeah. We just laying in there. We weren't talking. We weren't doing anything. Just numb almost. I mean, it was like so overwhelming. It destroyed my world. Yeah. And my dad said something to me that always kind of stuck to me. He said, after going through this with losing Sebastian, losing my grandson, losing a child out of order, he said, it's the worst thing that I've ever had to endure in my entire life. And I was talking to somebody else who had lost their grandson. And these people, they were still pretty sad, but he was like, I think they started to, move forward with their life. And my dad said, I don't know how. Mm-hmm. He said, I have no idea how people can ever move forward from something like this. My life will never be the same again. Yeah. And so that and it did. My life, there is a before April 15th, 2022, and there's an after. Yeah. Completely different lives. And so everything, I mean, I can't even tell you how I was feeling because it was just everything changed. Everything. How
did you get to, or what does after April 15th? What is that now, and how did you get there?
How did I get to where I'm at right now?
Yeah.
Oh, Lord. Well, I really, really reevaluated my life and figured out that I was doing some things in my life that weren't necessarily something that was making me happy. And I was kind of complacent and just, okay, so this is what we're doing now. Mm-hmm. And even with my job and everything else in my life, I was always the quintessential middle child, just kind of go with the flow and just, that's how it went. Yeah. And so I really cut out a lot of things that didn't make me happy. And I decided to do something that was going to finally make me happy and something that would make my parents proud of me and something that would make my kids proud of me and everything like that. And I wanted to feel uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And I know that sounds ridiculous because I was obviously feeling uncomfortable to begin with. But I wanted to feel uncomfortable because I think I had been complacent for so long, even with Sebastian's drug use. I think that I was just I wasn't oblivious because I saw the signs, yeah. But I just was okay. Yeah. And I was tired of just being okay. Yeah. And so that's when I started to make some changes in my life. And with that came pain, and I know that I've talked to you about this before, mm-hmm. is that actually being happy and being proud of myself for doing some stuff makes you feel guilty because how in the hell can you be happy after your son dies? Yeah. And it's not the same kind of happy. And you're never happy that person's not there to see it. And you wish every day that person would be able to be there to smile at you and tell you how proud they are. But you still have moments to where you're like, I'm making some good choices. I am growing. And, I had to be uncomfortable I'm still uncomfortable. But I had to be uncomfortable for a while. And I'm not good at being uncomfortable. I was always just pretty go with the flow.
Yeah. I want to unpack one thing you said in there. That's the idea that you can find ways to be happy now, but it's never the same.
No.
Can you talk about that? What is that? How do I understand what that feels like?
Sure. I mean, there's 1,000 different ways. I mean, like Facebook friends are having grandchildren, and Sebastian was my child that wanted kids. Yeah. And he said he wanted to enjoy his life in his 20s, and then in his 30s, he wanted to have a child. Yeah. And he's the only one of my children that, I mean, I highly doubt Talon will have a child, but he may adopt one someday, which I will love wholeheartedly. Yeah. But Nin won't have any children because she has a 50% chance of passing on her Apert syndrome to her child. So it's like I can be happy and I can be happy for them, but on the inside, I'm like, I'm never going to be a grandma. And that really does hurt. Mm-hmm. That hurts a whole lot. I'm never going to have something that has that big ass curly blonde hair again, you know? But it's just all sorts of things. Like when me and you have been up in Topeka, like Sebastian didn't live quietly. He told people what was going on with him. He was not shy about it. Now, he didn't divulge all the information like I told you. Yeah. I wasn't asking the right questions, but he wasn't shy about it. Yeah. He didn't come off like somebody he wasn't. Yeah. But so, although I wouldn't have been in Topeka with you had Sebastian not died, still, when I stood up there and I testified and told his story, like, I could feel how proud he would have been of me. Yeah. And so that's part of what's, you know, like he will never be able to brag about me on Facebook or anything like that. And he won't ever be able to see me graduate and all that other stuff that would have made him so proud. So, I mean, it's definitely different. Like, and it's just everyday life. Like, during fireworks season, Sebastian had a CBD treatment for the dogs that calmed them down during fireworks. And I don't know what it was. He just always gave me some. He's like, here, give this to Harley and she'll be great. Yeah. But I can't call him and say, hey, what was that, Bubs? You know? Yeah. I can't call him and ask him what that was. I can't call him and ask him for dinner. I can't make his favorite food, but on his birthday, on the same side of that, on his birthday, I made his favorite cake. You know, and I had Kat, his girlfriend, over, and I had the rest of my family over, and we all just came over and had his favorite cake and everything like that, and just talked to stories and everything like that, and it was great. But it's just when Nin is all up in her feelings about missing her brother, and when she says stuff to me like, you know, Sebastian never even got to see me play volleyball or something like that, it just breaks your heart. Yeah. And when Talon is upset because of one person in his life that understood like all aspects, like both sides of the family and what they went through growing up, and you know, all the little different aspects that you have in a family unit. His brother was the only one who understood everything that had happened. Yeah. And so when Talon's upset and he needs somebody to talk to, and, you know, he's missing his brother a lot, it's just, I mean, it's a lot sometimes. Yeah. Even now, and it's been 2.5 years. But it's definitely, I don't cry every day, but I miss him every day.
Yeah. It feels, as you were talking, I just kept thinking about this incredible weight of emptiness, right? That there's a part missing, and but it just is so heavy.
Yeah.
to have that part of your life missing
Yeah.
forever. And knowing that every experience going forward
Sure.
is
It's-
not as rich as it would have been.
Sure.
with
And
this
it's the
person.
life not lived by him.
Yeah.
It's all the possibilities of what he could have become and what he would have done and everything that we would have all experienced together. So yes, it is. But have you seen that statue that it's the cutout? It's completely hollow in the center, and it's I think it's called Grieving Mother or something
Yes.
like that.
Yep.
I've never had something that describes exactly how I felt. I mean, it just felt like there was this huge hole inside of me.
Yeah.
And there is nothing that will ever be able to replace that.
What do you, when you think about it, or if you allow yourself to think about it, what do you think Sebastian's life might have been?
Well, he wanted to marry Kat. I do know that. They weren't ready yet. They had both talked about it, and they knew that they weren't ready yet. And Kat was still on the, I don't think that Kat was 100% sure that she wanted kids, but I'm sure that Sebastian would have tried his hardest to talk her into it because he did want kids the whole time. So, I mean, I honestly think that Sebastian, if he would have been able to get help sooner, either sooner in life to where it didn't progress, or sooner that day, because either one of them could have made a difference, that he would have continued working the job that he had until he got all of his fines and everything paid off. And then I think that he would have done something like, I don't know if he would have gone to college or if he would have just used his brain to get another job, but I think that he would have done, I mean, I always thought that he was going to do great things. Like I really did, because his brain was so large. But he wasn't socially awkward, because a lot of people that are incredibly intelligent are socially awkward. And but he wasn't. He had great people skills. Like every job interview he went on, he got the job, and he made people believe in him. And he was a believable person.
Yeah.
And so I really do think that he would have definitely gone on to bigger and better things. And Yoder Meats was really great to him and everything like that. And they understood that he had to leave work for certain things and stuff like that. And they were always fine with it.
Yeah.
But I think that he would have definitely moved on and kept prospering and everything like that, because Sebastian and Kat had a little cute house, and they had a dog, and they had just gotten a second dog, or it was a puppy. And they had a couple cats, and they had their little family, and it was working. And I just remember that, like, Kat would be at work and Sebastian would be off that day, and I'd be like, "What are you doing today since you have the day off?" And he'd be like, "Well, I'm going to surprise Kat. I'm going to make sure the house is really clean so she feels like she can just relax when she gets home," just little stuff like that. So I think that he would have created a little space, and he would have had his nice little family and everything like that.
You talked about the birthday cake and having everybody over. What are some things that you and your family do to kind of keep his memory alive?
I have a cardboard cutout of him. So sometimes I'll just put it up, and like it feels like he's in the room with us.
Yeah.
I know it's kind of silly, but it's kind of nice. It's just a really good picture of him that my friend had made for me, and it's just a cardboard cutout so he can still be in family pictures and stuff like that. And but I mean, that's a little silly thing, but it's just like go to my grandma's grave, because Grandma died a couple months before Sebastian did. And Grandma was buried, Sebastian was cremated. And so, like, I'll go to Grandma's grave and I'll have Sebastian's ashes with me, and I'll just sprinkle some of them on Grandma's grave and then dump a Pepsi over the top of that so it makes ashes go in, because my grandma was a big Pepsi person. We just do little stupid stuff like that. But, yeah, we do birthdays and stuff like that. Make sure that we aren't alone on April 15th. And I try really hard to, I don't have to try. I just make sure that I keep in contact with Kat because she's a great person and it devastated her and completely turned her life all upside down too. And even if she would have never been involved with Sebastian, she's a great person that I'd want in my life. Yeah. But I really do want her in my life just because I love her so much and the way that he loved her. I just want to make sure that that part of him is definitely remembered.
Yeah.
So
you talked about coming to Topeka at my request.
Yes.
Because we first were working on the fentanyl testing strip bill.
Yes.
And then most recently, and we just did this the other day, had the bill signing with the governor on the Good Samaritan bill. And we've talked about this a little bit. And there was a prosecution in this case too, right? Where somebody was convicted of selling fentanyl.
Yes, it is called illegal distribution of a controlled substance that leads to death.
And I know that this is not something you had done before coming up and testify, but I pushed you pretty hard to do it. And then can you talk about that experience? And you talked about that was an uncomfortable experience for you, but one that you did and did very well. And I view you as being like key to making sure these happen. And stories that come from you and other families across the state who have experienced this, I think that is what convinced people in Topeka that this needed to happen.
Right, the personal experience. Yeah.
How do you feel about doing that work?
The going up there, I mean, it obviously made me very uncomfortable. I was, ridiculously nervous, but a lot of it was just like Sebastian didn't live quietly, and he would do the same thing if the situation were reversed. And so I just had to tell myself that. And the main thing that got me through was just like, if there is a chance that me testifying would save one child from having to call his mom and tell her the same news.
Yeah.
If it keeps one kid from having to have nightmares of hearing his mom scream, then I'm doing something. And I mean, just one.
Yeah.
That it would make it worth it. All my nerves and everything like that. So obviously, you know me well enough to know that it made me very uncomfortable, but I pushed through. And then I found that I could be proud of it because although it was hard for me to acknowledge at first, it did take a lot of guts to do it. And I can acknowledge that now. At the time, I didn't feel like I had any guts at all. I just felt like I was going to throw up.
Yeah.
But so I mean, I'm glad that I did it. I'm glad that you pushed me to do it, and I wouldn't change anything about it. But it was definitely nerve-wracking and definitely way out of my comfort zone. But there has been people that have stopped me and been like, you helped with this and I appreciate it so much. Somebody would just be like, I saw you on this news article and I just wanted to say thank you. And it's just the weirdest thing because in my head, I went and told a story. That's really what I did. And I didn't have to look up any statistics like some of them did. I didn't have to know any numbers. I didn't have to do anything except for tell my son's story. And so it did feel weird at first that people were giving me recognition for just telling a story.
Yeah.
But I can look back now and be like, you know what? I did help.
Yeah.
So
I wonder, too, if at the time of Sebastian's death, you might have felt very alone in your experience when after that, when people talk to you, did you come to realize that there are a lot of people that have similar experiences?
Yeah, definitely. Some of them very overwhelming. But there was a lot of people that contacted me because I decided not to grieve quietly, which is my tendency. And I mean, I did, but not to the extent I would have rathered.
Yeah.
But so there was a lot of people that reached out to me and said that they had lost a son or they had lost, somebody else due to it and stuff like that. And, I had several people reach out to me and ask how they could help and stuff of that sort. And so, although I did definitely feel before Sebastian died that maybe I had my head buried in the sand a little bit, that afterwards my eyes were definitely opened to, holy crap, this is just absurd how much this drug is killing people. And and then we have people like Libby, whose son was so young.
Yeah, 15.
Yeah.
And she's from the Kansas City, Johnson County area. Yeah.
And it's just like, to my knowledge, I did read her testimony, but it's been a little while. Like, he didn't have any prior history, just that he had, kind of dabbled in some things, but not like Sebastian's prior history. Yeah. And it's just like she didn't even have time to ask the right questions.
No.
And so it's definitely something that...
I think he went to a party and took what he thought was half of a Percocet.
Yeah, something like that.
And it was fentanyl, and it killed him. And
yeah.
his other friends, for whatever reason, also took that drug, and they didn't die.
Oh, yeah.
But he did.
Yeah. I think she said that he was an adventurous kid that would try lots of things, but I don't know anything else about him. But yeah, I remember that it was like half a Percocet, and that's just like at a party, because I imagine some of the stupid stuff I did at 15.
Sure.
I mean...
Yeah, I think everybody needs to take a moment and think about who they were and what they were doing at 15, 16, 17, and consider, certainly when I look at what I was doing, it could have, if we had lived in a world where fentanyl was a thing,
right?
I think life could have turned out a lot differently for us too,
Sure.
Any number of ways. I'm curious about Nin and how she has handled or taken Sebastian's loss.
She didn't at first. She just didn't. I don't even know how to describe it. Obviously she cried, and obviously she was upset, but she was just blank for a while. And then she wanted to go to her dad's house after it happened, because it was just too heavy for her at my house. So she went to her dad's house, and honestly, I have no idea how long she stayed. It was like everything was so there, in the midst of all this, you have to plan a funeral. And thank God I have an amazing best friend and an amazing sister, because I don't think I would have been able to do it. I was there, and when they were planning it, and I shook my head at the appropriate times, and I signed paperwork that I needed to sign, but I didn't plan the celebration of life. My sister took that on. I didn't message people. I didn't spell check obituaries and stuff like that. That there's a lot of things that have to go on with that. Susie and Nin took care of all that for me, and allowed me to just be numb and float through and get through. And so Nin was gone for probably 2 days or something like that. And then she would come home and she would just sit next to me. Like, sit next to me. And sometimes when I was unable to get out of bed, she'd just crawl into bed next to me. And sometimes we would go downstairs in the basement and just like curl up on Talon's couch, because he had a little living room down there, and we'd just curl up on Talon's couch and we'd all just kind of sit there and not say anything, but not necessarily cry. And Susie would come over and she'd be like, "Did you guys eat?" And she would take Nin and go get something to eat with her and stuff like that. And just, you know, Nin wouldn't have let me forget to feed her. That's for sure. Nin wouldn't have let me forget to feed her. But she was just really numb for quite some time. And then it was probably a year afterwards, she started talking about it. And, I mean, it was a while. I mean, she would say little things. Like when she started the Special Olympics, because she didn't start that until after he passed away. When she started the Special Olympics, she would say something like, "Do you think Bubba would be proud of me?" Or, "Do you think Bubba's watching me?" And, you know, stuff like that. When she'd do something really cool, she'd like dab. And she'd be like, "That's for Bubba," you know, and just be her silly self. So she didn't like completely avoid the subject, but it was probably a year and a half after he passed away that she actually started talking to me about it. It actually, I had to have the conversation with her because of the fentanyl testing strips. So I had to actually have a real conversation with her about what fentanyl was and why it killed Sebastian. And she's like, "Well, why isn't fentanyl illegal?" And I'm just like, "Well, because it does help some people. But the fact that Sebastian had been clean for so long, it affected him very strongly." And
this is one thing we know now,
Yeah,
right? That
right.
people who get clean and then relapse are at the highest risk
Yes.
of death.
Yes. And so people that dabble continuously have a better survival rate, yes. But so that we do know that is most likely the reason he was so susceptible to it. But I had to have an actual conversation with her before, after all the fentanyl and stuff like that, because obviously she wanted to know why I was going to Topeka.
Yeah.
And she had a lot of anxiety. She was so afraid that I was going to die. Until actually just recently, anytime that I would go anywhere without her, she was afraid. She'd be like, "Be safe, Mom, please." I don't know where I would go if you died. Like, I don't know who would take me. Like, would anybody be able to deal with me? I'm so dramatic, because she's dramatic and she knows it. But like when I was driving to Topeka back and forth, those numerous times that I went up there, like she would have like panic attacks, and she'd be like, "Mom, let me know you're safe, please," you know, and stuff like that. And like, "Let me know when you get there." And she's in school, not supposed to be texting.
Yeah.
And she's, you know, sending me these messages because she's worried out of her mind about me. And so she was very, very, I think that was definitely a side effect of it. She was so afraid of losing me.
Yeah.
After that. And but when she started talking about him, you know, she would talk about all the good stuff, but she would also talk, like, we also had some real conversations about, you know, how decisions that we make sometimes really do affect other people around us. And you know, she was worried that Sebastian did it on purpose. That not necessarily a suicide attempt, but like she just couldn't fathom why he decided to use again.
Yeah.
And we don't know. And that's something when people relapse, unless you have an explicit conversation with them about it, you have no idea why they relapse, because there's a lot of shame in relapsing. And so you hide it. And so, how do you have a conversation with your, at that time 16-year-old daughter about why her brother chose to end his life? And I'm like, he didn't choose this, honey. He did not choose to end his life. And, she's just like, well, some people have told me that, God wanted him at home and stuff like that. What's your feelings on that? And I said, I'm going to let you develop your own feelings on that. I was like, I know how it made me feel when somebody said that to me, but I don't want to impress my opinions on you. And I was like, so you just think about it and you decide, whether or not you want to think that Sebastian was so special that God wanted to call him home, or if you just want to think that accidents happen. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, that is not for me to tell you how to feel about that. So those were definitely some really hard conversations to have with a 16-year-old girl.
Yeah, definitely.
So that was definitely hard.
There's a story that you started to tell me a year or so ago. Mm-hmm. I hope you'll tell it here.
Okay. You got me scared.
It was about, it's before Sebastian's service. Mm-hmm. When you did his hair.
Oh, yes.
Can you talk to me about this?
Okay, so Sebastian had this amazing, really, really, really thick, very curly blonde hair. Just a smidgen of red in it. And it never got darker as he matured. Mm-hmm. Puberty didn't make it go brown like most kids it does. And he was very, very prideful of his hair. He had an amazing lion's mane of hair. And it was one of the things that he was definitely proud of, and one of the things that girls would come up to him and be like, oh, I wish I had your hair, and everything like that. So, he would always call me, and he'd be like, my hair's doing this weird thing. Like, what can I do? And, what shampoo should I be using and stuff like that. So his hair was important to him. And so the day that he died, his hair was back in a little ponytail. And so I called them, and I talked to the funeral home, and I was just like, I don't want anybody to do his hair. I want to do his hair because I've seen people in funeral homes, they just wash it and it dries straight back, and that wasn't how he looked. And so I wanted to do it. I did not want to do it, but I wanted to do it. Kind of as my time to really talk to him and say my actual goodbyes to him and everything like that. And it took me quite a while. I had to, I went in there and he had no makeup or anything on. He's just my boys laying on the table. Mm. And, I'm sitting behind the table, and I trying to detangle his hair. And after you die, your hair follicles loosen up a little bit, so you can lose more hair than what you would in normal everyday life. But we've got a ton of hair, so some falls out anyways. But I'm doing it super careful so I don't make him lose any hair, because in my head I'm like, he would kill me if he looks bald at his funeral. I got to make it look perfect. So I'm sitting there and I'm talking to him and detangling his hair and doing all this stuff, and they didn't wash it. But the room that I'm in was just one of their showing rooms. It's just a room, and there's a block underneath his head. And so it's just leaning back. And so his hair wasn't clean, but which isn't a big problem, except for that during CPR, fluids are expelled. And so his face was clean, they had used a washcloth on his face. But I'm trying to style my son's hair and detangle it and everything with blood in my son's hair. And so that was hard, but I just, I kept talking to him, and I'm trying to be Bubba, you are lucky I love you. Mm-hmm. But Sebastian was my first haircut ever.
Yeah.
He had a ton of hair when he was born, and he needed a haircut every 2 weeks. And that's probably part of the reason why he grew his hair out, was because it just was so much that he had to get it cut so often. But so he was my first haircut, and I just wanted to honor him and send him out, the way that he would have wanted to be sent out. And so it was... It was creepy, not in the sense where, like, I thought he was going to set up, or I didn't ever even look at him and think that it looked like he was breathing or anything like that. But I'm in this quiet room, and, like, the air conditioner would kick on, so you'd hear something knocking. And it'd be right after I'd ask him a question or something like that. I'm just like... Am I hurting you? I was just being silly and trying to get through it is what I was trying to do. So, but I was talking to him and telling him how much I love him and stuff like that. But then I'd get a tangle and I'd be like, did that hurt? I'm sorry. And then there'd be like this knocking sound or something like that. And I'm just like, okay, I don't believe in this stuff, but yeah. And, seriously, it's air conditioner kicking on or whatever is going on. But so it was weird, but I felt calm while I was doing it. And that is not something that you would think that you would feel while you are styling your dead son's hair for his funeral. But I really did. I felt really calm while I was in there working with his hair and while I was doing it. And the lady comes in to check on me because I'd been in there for quite some time. And I was just like, sorry, I'm talking with them and everything like that while I'm doing it. And she's like, it's fine. We don't usually have moms come and style their kids' hair. So I was just making sure that you're okay. She's like, I knew he had a ton of hair, but like the way they saw it wasn't at all the way that it normally looked.
Yeah.
Because it had been in a ponytail for several days at that point, probably. Yeah. And so after I finished, I told her, I was just like, after it's dry, how's the pillow going to be situated? And I'm like telling her where to move them and everything like that. So his hair looked good for the funeral. And I was weirdly calm and also proud that I could send him off like in top form.
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't have changed it for anything, but I wouldn't recommend doing it either.
Yeah. A hard experience.
Yeah, it
but
was.
Even if it was maybe a little, maybe healing, a little bit healing
Yeah,
for
I do
you.
think so, because I got, any other time I saw him, there was a bunch of other people around.
Yeah.
And so I couldn't, like in the funeral home or at the funeral or anything like that, like there was always somebody watching me to make sure that I was okay.
Yeah.
And so that was my time to talk with him and to tell him that I wasn't mad at him, and that was important. And I did need to tell him I was mad at him. But I mean, I have gone through phases where I am mad at him, but, and to ask him for forgiveness, And so that's the time that I needed, was to be able to really just say what I needed to say without other people, paying too much heed to what was going on. And so it was definitely very healing and very, it felt like something released. And it helped a lot. It definitely helped a lot, just having to be able to take that time and that care just to show him how important he was to me one last time.
Yeah.
So, but yeah.
Thank you for coming in and talking with me today, and for all the times that you came to Topeka, even at the last minute when I call you up and you'd have to rearrange your schedule. You did so much on that. I'm glad that you came in today, and I'm really thankful that you came in and shared your story with us. And yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening to That Podcast in Hutch. I need to thank a few people, starting with my producer, Christopher Acker, who does his best to make me sound my best every week, my friend Jenny Brigette for producing the artwork and the logos for the show, and my son Mitch for making the theme music that you hear at the beginning and the end. If you like the show, I encourage you to like and subscribe it on your streaming service and recommend it to your friends. You can also follow us on That Podcast in Hutch on Facebook, That Guy in Hutch on YouTube, and you can follow me personally at Jason Probst or That Guy in Hutch on Instagram and Facebook.
A Salt City Sound production.